Jake never thought a simple walk to the market would change his life forever. He was just a human mechanic, working with broken parts and old tools in a dusty corner of the alien trade station. Every day was the same fix, clean, sleep, repeat. But that night, something pulled him to the open square near the glowing fountain. That's when he saw her. She stood under the moonlight, wearing a dark cloak, her face half covered. But her eyes, those glowing purple eyes, shined like stars through the shadows. Jake stopped walking, his heart skipping a beat. He had never seen anyone like her, not even in the wildest stories told by drunken pilots. She looked lost, or maybe just curious. A group of rough-looking aliens surrounded her, laughing and shouting things in a language Jake didn't understand. One of them reached for her arm. Before he even thought, Jake stepped forward. "Hey," he said loudly, his voice shaking a little. "Leave her alone." The group turned to look at him, surprised. Jake didn't have a weapon, just a wrench tucked into his belt. They stared at him, then laughed, and slowly walked away, still muttering. The girl looked at him without fear, her glowing eyes studying his face. "Are you okay?" Jake asked, feeling awkward. She nodded slowly, then spoke in perfect, clear English. "You are very bold for a human." That voice, it was soft, calm, and strange, like music made of light. "I just didn't like how they were treating you," he replied, scratching the back of his neck. "You don't know who I am, do you?" she asked, tilting her head slightly. Jake shook his head. "No. Should I?" She pulled back her hood, and Jake's eyes widened. Her skin was a light silver blue, smooth and glowing faintly. Her long hair flowed like liquid metal, and small crystals sparkled on her forehead. She wasn't just another alien girl, she was something special. "My name is Zara," she said, smiling just a little. "I'm Jake," he replied, heart pounding. They stood there for a while, talking about the stars, human food, and the strange weather on the station. She seemed curious about Earth, asking about oceans and chocolate. Jake laughed when she made a face after tasting a candy bar he offered. "You eat this often?" she asked, trying not to spit it out. "Too often," he said, chuckling. Zara smiled more now, relaxed, as if forgetting who she was. But someone hadn't forgotten. Far away, in the shadow of a tall tower, an armored figure watched them through a scope. His eyes narrowed when he saw Jake laugh. He tapped a button on his arm, sending a silent message. A small red dot blinked near Jake's boot, but he never noticed. The night grew colder, and Zara said, "I should go now." Jake nodded, trying to hide his disappointment. "Will I see you again?" he asked. "Maybe," she said, her voice teasing. "If you survive?" Jake laughed. Thinking it was a joke, he watched her disappear into the crowd, her cloak flowing behind her. He walked back to his small metal room, his mind spinning with thoughts of her. He didn't notice the strange silence around him, or the missing guard at his hallway. The door to his room hissed open, but not by his hand. 3 tall aliens stepped inside, their eyes cold and armor dark. Jake Matthews. One said, "You are hereby selected for mandatory military service." "What? Military?" he asked, confused and half asleep. "You leave now," the voice replied firmly, before he could argue. They grabbed his arms and injected something into his neck. His world blurred, then faded. The last thing he saw before everything went black was a message blinking on a screen. "Transfer approved by order of General Thalvox." And somewhere, in the highest tower, Zara's father closed the screen. He stared at the photo of Jake and whispered, "Let's see if you're still laughing after the first battle." Jake opened his eyes to a loud buzzing sound. His body felt heavy, like it didn't belong to him anymore. He looked around, confused and groggy. He wasn't in his small room anymore. Instead, he was strapped into a seat on a fast-moving transport ship outside the small window. Clouds of smoke and fire floated through space. Beside him sat strange-looking alien soldiers with hard faces and cold eyes. Every one of them was armed,
Armored.
and ready for war. Jake tried to speak, but his voice came out dry and weak. A voice snapped at him from across the row. "Don't speak, just listen." Jake turned and saw a tall alien with green skin and sharp teeth. "You're property of the Vulcan army now," the alien said. With a grin, "You were chosen by the general himself." Jake's heart dropped. This wasn't some kind of training camp or test. This was real, and he was going to war. He remembered Zara's soft voice and glowing eyes. Had she known this? What happened to him? Was she part of it, or had her father acted behind her back? Jake didn't know what to think, only that he felt cold and betrayed. The shuttle landed hard on a metal platform surrounded by red cliffs and thunder in the sky. Soldiers marched out. In rows, yelling commands and slamming boots, Jake stumbled out last, still dizzy from whatever they had injected into him. A huge alien officer shouted at him, "You, human, hurry up or die slow." Jake didn't argue. He was given a heavy uniform, old boots, and a rifle that looked too advanced for him to understand. He wasn't a fighter, just a mechanic who once dreamed of building his own ship. Now he was being trained to kill the camp. Was brutal. They didn't treat him like a soldier, but like a joke. Aliens pushed him, mocked him, laughed every time he fell or failed. But Jake didn't give up. Every night he stayed awake, fixing broken equipment just to keep his hands busy. He studied the alien weapons when no one was watching. He started to learn their fighting moves in secret. If he had to survive, he would do it his way, not theirs. One evening, while cleaning his gear, he found a small, folded note under his blanket. It was written in a soft, neat script. "I'm sorry, Jake. I didn't know he'd do this. Please survive. I'm trying to help, see?" Jake held the note for a long time, his hands shaking, so she hadn't betrayed him. She had cared, even if her father didn't. That small message gave him strength, more than any weapon ever could. The next day, during combat drills, the trainer barked, "Human, today you lead." Jake blinked, confused. "Lead? What?" "The beast run," the trainer said, smiling cruelly. Jake looked ahead and saw what they meant. A massive steel gate opened, and something huge stepped into the training field. It had 4 legs, glowing red eyes, and armor-like skin. The creature roared loud enough to shake the sky. Jake was pushed forward, weapon in hand, with no backup. The other soldiers stood behind the safety line, watching. Jake's mind raced. He didn't know how to fight something like that. He saw weak points under its neck and behind its knees. He remembered something from the engine vents he used to overheat the joints, cause collapse. Instead of firing wildly, Jake aimed for the small vents under the creature's legs. He used every trick he knew from fixing engines and broke one of its supports. The beast screamed and fell, crashing into the ground hard. The whole camp went silent. Then one alien whispered, "Did the human just kill it?" Another said, "No one has ever done that alone." The trainer looked stunned but quickly covered it with a cold nod. Jake stood there, covered in dust, holding the rifle tight. That night, no one laughed at him, but in the shadows near the tent, a figure stood watching. She wore a medic's uniform and kept her face low as Jake passed by. She dropped something near his boot and disappeared. He picked it up, another note. This one said, "I'm here now, hidden. I'll find a way to get you out." Jake looked around, his heart beating fast. She had come to the camp. She was nearby, but what would her father do if he found out? And more importantly, what would happen next? Jake didn't sleep that night. He just stared at the stars, waiting for the next storm to come. The ground shook with each step as the creature charged straight at him. Jake aimed. But his rifle clicked. It was jammed. No time to fix it, no time to think. Only one chance to live. He dropped the weapon, grabbed a sharp metal rod from the ground and ran straight toward the beast. The alien soldiers watching from behind the barrier screamed for him to run the other way. But Jake didn't stop. He rolled under the creature's claws, stabbed the rod into a weak joint, and jumped back. The beast howled in pain and stumbled, crashing into a power pillar. Sparks flew, the air filled with smoke, and Jake dropped too. One knee catching his breath. That was the second time he faced death and walked away. Now they didn't laugh at the human anymore. They stared at him like he was something different. Something dangerous. The officers whispered his name. The soldiers nodded when he passed by. One even handed him a protein pack without being asked. Jake didn't want fame. He just wanted answers. Why was he really here? Why had Zara's father sent him into battle when he clearly had no training? And why had the others suddenly stopped mocking him after today? There was something more going on, and Jake could feel it later that night. Jake sat alone near the edge of camp, sharpening a knife just to stay busy. He heard a soft rustle and turned quickly. Someone stepped out of the darkness wearing a medic's hood. He stood up fast, ready to fight, until he saw those eyes, the glowing purple eyes. "Zara," he whispered, almost not believing it. She raised a finger to her lips, then stepped into the dim light. She looked tired, scared, but still just as beautiful. "I had to see you," she said quietly. "Before they send you out again?" Jake couldn't speak for a moment, his mind full of questions. But she spoke first. "I didn't know my father would do this to you. I swear." "I believe you," Jake said. "But why is he doing this?" "Why me?" Zara looked down, struggling to find the words. "There's a story among my people," she said. "A prophecy. It says a human, marked by the stars, would rise in battle and awaken the blood of the ancients." Jake raised an eyebrow. "I'm not a warrior. I fix broken machines. But you keep surviving," Zara replied. "And now the soldiers follow you." She handed him a small crystal, glowing faintly with soft blue light. "It's a memory stone," she said. "My mother left it before she died." Jake touched it and saw images flash in his mind, visions of humans standing among alien kings. It didn't make sense, but something inside him stirred. "Why are you risking coming here?" he asked, still staring at the crystal. "Because I care," Zara said, her voice shaking. "And I can't let you die for something you didn't choose." She stepped closer and placed a hand on his chest. "You're not just a human anymore, Jake. You're becoming part of something bigger." Before he could answer, loud alarms began to ring through the camp. Zara's eyes widened. "That's a security sweep. I have to go." She turned and vanished into the shadows before he could stop her. Jake quickly hid the crystal inside his boot and returned to his tent. The next morning, Jake was called to the command tent. Zara's father, General Thalvex, stood tall in black armor, staring down at him like a mountain. "You think you've impressed them, human?" he asked coldly. Jake didn't answer. "You may have survived the beast," the general continued, "but you are still not one of us." Jake looked him in the eye, saying nothing. "Tomorrow, you lead a new charge," the general said. "If you fail, your death will be an example." Jake nodded once, then walked out without a word. Outside, the other soldiers watched him go, quiet and uncertain. But one alien warrior clapped him on the back and said, "We'll follow you, human." That night, Jake sat on his bunk, holding the memory crystal tight in his hand. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring. But one thing was clear: he couldn't run anymore. This fight was no longer just about survival. Now it was about truth, about power, and maybe, just maybe, about love. The stars blinked above him, But Jake wasn't looking up. He was staring at the strange message glowing on his tent wall. It hadn't been there before. The words kept changing, shifting like light on water. But one thing stayed the same, his name, over and over, as if the stars themselves were calling to him. He reached out and touched the glowing letters. The moment his fingers brushed the wall, the tent vanished. Suddenly, Jake was standing in open space. The ground beneath him was black glass, the sky filled with spinning galaxies. He looked around, confused and breathless. A soft voice echoed through the emptiness. "You've been marked human," it said, "and now you must see." A beam of light shot down in front of him, forming a tall figure. It looked like Zara. But older, wiser, wrapped in royal cloth and starlight. Jake took a step forward, his voice shaking. "Zara." "No," the figure said, "but she is part of me, just as you are." The vision stretched out her hand, and Jake saw flashing images inside her palm. A massive alien empire burning, a line of warriors falling, and at the center, single. Human standing tall. His face was not clear, but Jake felt something strange. He knew it was him. The figure spoke again. "This is what your enemy fears, not your strength, but your connection to what was lost." Jake shook his head. "I don't understand any of this," the figure whispered. "You will." And everything went dark. He woke with a gasp, sweat pouring down his face. He was back in his bunk. But the message on the tent wall was gone. Only one thing remained, a glowing mark on his wrist, shaped like a broken circle. The next day, he didn't tell anyone. Not even the alien soldiers who now followed his orders in battle. But someone else already knew, far away in the royal city. Zara stared at the same symbol glowing on her own wrist. She touched it with her fingers, eyes wide with fear and hope. "It's happening," she whispered. "He's waking up." Back at camp, Jake was called to a private meeting with Commander Rith. She wasn't alone. 3 older alien officers stood around a hologram table, their faces serious. Rith pointed to the floating image of a star system. "This play sector, Vetri used to be a holy site," she said. "Now it's dead." Jake frowned. "Why show me?" One officer growled. "Because you triggered something ancient last night." Jake felt cold. "You mean the dream?" "Not a dream," Rith said. "A memory lock, a hidden message left in your bloodline." Jake's heart sank. "You're saying I'm part of this?" "You're not just part," she said. "You're the key." Before he could ask more, a soldier rushed in. "Commander, we found something near the southern Cliffsbury drone, still active." Rith turned sharply. "Take us there." Now they flew fast across the battlefield, skimming over burnt trees and broken land at the base of the cliffs. Soldiers stood around a glowing orb sticking out of the dirt. Jake stepped forward, drawn to it, the moment he touched it. The drone lit up and projected a symbol into the sky, a silver eye with a star inside it. Everyone froze. "That's the lost seal," an officer said quietly. "From the First Empire," Rith turned to Jake. "Now you understand why you were sent here." Jake didn't speak, but inside, something finally clicked. Zara's father hadn't just punished him, he had tried to hide him or bury him. Before the truth could rise, that night, alone again. Jake took out the small crystal Zara gave him. It glowed brighter than before when he touched it to the silver mark on his wrist. A soft voice came alive in his head. Zara's voice. "Jake, if you hear this, it means everything is moving faster than I hoped. My father will soon know you've been activated. Please trust no one but your heart. And when the time comes, choose me." The message faded, but Jake's mind was spinning. She knew, she had known all along, and now, so did he. The air inside the warship felt too still, like something was holding its breath, waiting for a scream. Jake stood in the center of the long steel corridor, his boots echoing softly as he walked toward the glowing door. He had been summoned, no reason given, no warning, but he already knew who waited on the other side. General Kror, Zara's father, the one who sent him to die and failed. The door hissed open. And there he was, standing like a statue made of armor and shadows. Behind him, alien officers lined the room, silent and unreadable. But Jace didn't look at them. He only looked at the general. "You've survived more than I expected," Kror said coldly. Jace said nothing. "You think your little victories mean something?" the general went on. "That killing a jungle beast or touching forgotten machines makes you strong." Still, Jace stayed silent. He didn't come here to argue. He came to find out why. Kror stepped closer, eyes hard as stone. "I brought you here because I'm offering you a choice," he said. "In front of my army, you will face one of my strongest warriors. If you survive, I'll consider your feelings for my daughter." Jace's heart jumped. So this was it. A trap dressed as a test. He glanced around the room, but there was no way out. He was already caught in the web. Kror raised his arm and the floor opened behind him. A platform rose, and standing on it was a monster of a soldier 8 feet tall, made of scars, steel, and rage. The alien's arms were covered in tattoos, and his eyes burned with hate. The room shook as the doors locked behind Jace. No escape, only the fight. Jace stepped forward slowly, his hand resting on the blade given to him, but deep down he knew this wasn't enough. That warrior could snap him in two. Then he felt something strange in his belt pocket, a small hidden object, cold and smooth. He pulled it out just enough to see Zara's gift, a curved handle, small and silver, glowing with a quiet light. He didn't know how she got it to him, but somehow she had. The warrior growled, stepping into the arena center. "Let's see what Earth's garbage can do," he sneered. Jace didn't answer. He closed his eyes for 1 second, then pulled out the weapon. It flashed once, then extended into a long blade. Whispering with energy, the crowd leaned forward. Silent Kror's expression didn't change, but his fingers twitched slightly. The fight began. The warrior charged like a storm, swinging a heavy axe. Jace dodged, barely, the wind of the blade cutting across his face. He ducked under the second swing and slashed at the warrior's leg. Sparks flew, but not enough. The alien howled and slammed Jace backward, sending him flying. Jace hit the ground hard, rolling to his feet just in time. Blood dripped from his nose, but he held his ground. He remembered what Rith told him. "You're not stronger, but you're faster. Smarter use that." He began circling, drawing the warrior into a trap. 1 step back, 2 steps left. Bait. The swing, then roll. He sliced again, this time cutting a deep mark across the alien's ribs. The warrior roared and smashed the ground, shaking the arena. But Jace didn't stop. He moved like lightning now, using every moment, every breath. Until the final blow, he slid under the warrior's last attack and drove the silver blade into the alien's side. Right between the armor plates, a scream filled the hall. The warrior fell to one knee, then to the floor, motionless. The crowd was frozen. No one cheered, no one moved. Jace stood over the fallen giant, shaking but standing. Kror stepped down slowly, his boots heavy on the steel. He walked past Jace and looked at the warrior's body. Then, without looking at the boy, he said, "You've proven something. But don't think for 1 second you've won." He turned and walked away. The doors opened again, and the soldiers stepped aside, letting Jace walk through them. This time, they looked at him differently, not with hate, but with fear, far away. In a locked chamber, Zara watched the feed with her hand over her mouth, tears in her eyes, but a fire in her chest. He had survived. He had fought back, and now things were beginning to shift. What she didn't know was that her father had just sent orders. A new mission, one that would push Jace beyond all limits. one he wasn't meant to return from. The crown fell to the floor with a sharp metallic ring. Zara stared down at it, breathing hard, hands shaking. Guards outside her chamber had already heard the noise. They would come in soon. But she didn't care anymore. She had been silent long enough. She had watched her father push the boy she cared about into fire. She had smiled in public, nodded in council meetings, all while Jace bled. All while he survived things no normal human ever should. She touched the small crystal hidden in her cloak, the last one she had. A one-time key to the restricted launch bay. She pressed it to her palm, and the wall shimmered open. Behind it waited a tall figure dressed in shadows, her loyal bodyguard. Karan, he bowed, not with pride, but sadness. "You're really doing this, princess?" She nodded slowly. "If I don't, he dies on the next mission." Meanwhile, far across the system, Jay sat on a cargo crate, checking his weapon. He didn't recognize the location. The ground beneath his feet was red rock, the air thick and dry, but something felt wrong. The soldiers here didn't look like a regular squad. They looked like executioners wearing uniforms. The commanding officer walked up, smiling with false kindness. "New orders from General Cror," he said, handing Jace a data chip. "Deep drop into the Tragon crater." Jace frowned. "That's a dead zone, exactly," the man said. With a grin, "We're sending a hero where no hero returns." Jace stared at the chip, then at the fake smiles around him. So this was it. The mission that was supposed to end him. But as they boarded the dropship, a small beep came from Jace's wristband. A secret signal pulsing gently. He tapped it once. A message opened in mid-Arnley, 2 words. "Run now." Jace's heart jumped. He looked around, knowing the signal came from her, from Zara. But he had no time to think. The ship lifted into the air. Then suddenly, the lights blinked and alarms screamed. A blast shook the hull, sending soldiers flying outside. A stealth fighter zipped past, firing again, knocking the dropship off course. Jace saw the pilot's face through the glass. Sarah. She flew like she had nothing to lose, and maybe she didn't. The dropship crashed into the rocks below. Half the crew scattered or unconscious. Jace crawled out of the wreckage, arm bleeding. Zara landed her fighter just ahead, throwing the cockpit open. "Get in," she yelled. Jace didn't ask how or why. He ran, leaped inside, and they took off, fire behind them. "Are you insane?" he shouted over the engine. "Maybe," she said, gripping the controls. "But I'd rather be insane with you than safe without you." They dodged blaster fire from above. Cror's warships were already closing in. "This is treason," Jace muttered. Zara smirked. "Then let's make it worth the punishment." She hit a sharp turn, diving toward the mountains. They needed a place to hide a anything. Jace stared at her, heart pounding not from the danger, but from the fact that she had risked everything for him above the clouds. Cror stood on his command deck, staring at the flashing radar. His daughter's ship had just gone rogue, and the human was with her. "Bring them back," he said coldly, "or bring me their ashes, back in the cockpit." Alarms blared again. 3 enemy fighters locked onto their trail. Zara looked at Jace's eyes, calm but fierce. "We're not going to outrun them," she said. "Then we fight," Jace replied, gripping the side turret together. The stars looked peaceful, but peace was a lie. Zara's stolen ship drifted in silence above a shattered moon. Engines offline, shields gone. Fuel nearly empty. Inside the dark cockpit, Jace sat with one hand over his ribs, bleeding and tired. Zara stood by the control panel, her body swaying but her eyes still sharp. They had escaped the last fighter by flying through a collapsing canyon. But the damage was too much. The ship was dying, and so were they. "We've got maybe 1 hour of air," Jace said, voice low. Zara didn't answer. She just looked out at the massive flagship now floating toward them. Her father's ship, cold, unstoppable. Filled with soldiers waiting to drag them back, to destroy them. Jace stood slowly, limping over to her side. You don't have to face him, he said. I do, she replied. Not for him, for me. The COM system flickered to life. A familiar voice echoed through the speakers. Calm and deep. You've proven your point, daughter, Cror said. You've shown the galaxy your heart. Jace stepped forward. If you want someone to blame, blame me. Cror's voice didn't change. I don't blame you. Human, he said. You survived every test I gave you. I hate that you did, but I cannot deny what you are now. Zara narrowed her eyes. What do you want, father? Cror's reply was chilling. I want you both to surrender. Return to the capital. Live as legends or die here as fools. Jace looked at Zara. She looked at him. No words were needed. They both turned and began activating the ships. Last defense systems. If we're going out, Jace said, we're going out together. Zara smiled. Always. But before they could launch their final stand, a new signal cut through the noise. Another ship appeared, smaller, older, but fast. A rebel transport, painted in old Earth markings. Unidentified ship. This is Captain Bren of the Free Fleet, the voice called. We've been watching you, and we like your style. Jace blinked in shock. Free Fleet. The galaxy's not as quiet as Cror thinks, Bren replied. You just lit the fire we were waiting for. Suddenly, dozens of ships blinked into view, hidden behind the ruined moon. Old fighters, freighters, alien vessels with scratched hulls and patched weapons, but they were ready. Cror's flagship fired its cannons. The rebels answered. War filled the stars, and Jace found himself back in a cockpit. Only this time, he wasn't alone. Zara flew beside him in a spare fighter, her voice steady in his ear. This is the fight that matters, she said. For all the ones who never had a choice, Jace nodded, gripping the controls. He dived into the battle with fire in his blood. No more proving himself, no more tests. This was who he was now. Together, they flew through enemy lines. Disabling Cror's escorts one by one, Jace took a hit to the wing, but kept going. Zara shielded a rebel transport from enemy fire, taking a blast to her hull. They fought like they had something worth dying for, because they did, in the final moment. With Cror's flagship charging its main cannon, Jace made the call. He flew straight at the weapon core. Dodging blasts and burning wires, Zara followed him in. They dropped the last charge of combined energy cores stolen from Cror's own vaults. And then they flew out, just as the explosion bloomed behind them. The flagship shattered, the war ended, and the galaxy watched in silence, weeks later. On a quiet green moon far from war and blood, Jace and Zara stood side by side. No more running, no more hiding. Just a quiet life in a home they've built themselves, sometimes. Zara still looked at the stars. Jace would come beside her, take her hand. You ever think we should have stayed quiet? He'd joke. She'd smile and miss all that fun. The galaxy moved on, but in old bars, on forgotten space stations. People still whispered the story about a human who fell in love with a warlord's daughter. And together, they didn't just survive, they changed everything.